Okay, so here it is. This is my guaranteed method to win your fantasy football draft. This is a strategy that it's the Moneyball way, the advanced analytics, the way to approach your draft to make sure that you win this year's fantasy football draft. Okay, so what we've got to do is start with a big background picture here. And so in the past, you probably heard, if you're like me, you follow a lot of people, you've been doing fantasy football for a long time, had success and failure, etc. For me, this started back a couple years ago. The past couple of seasons, I had finished 11th out of 12. I do sports media. I'm a sports media professor. I do quantitative social scientific research. I was familiar enough with math and actually my research is in the use of base rate information or numbers, often statistics, in sports broadcasting. And yet, I couldn't figure out a strategy for how to approach my draft the best way. And so after having had a lot of failure, being frustrated with some of these in these leagues, I decided to approach this as a problem that could be solved quantitatively. So what I figured out, and what you'll see, is you'll have these generic rankings of players based on their projected point totals for the season. And they'll try to take into account a number of different factors. The problem is leagues vary so much. The number of teams in your league, whether or not you have a tight end or flex, multiple flex, a super flex, half point PPR, full point, etc. All these things. So how do you navigate all of that? Well, you've heard before. You can have two of the three. Something that's cheap, something that's quick, or something that's quality. Well, in this case, you will get the quality. It will be free. It will take you a little bit of time. So, with that in mind, here is your guaranteed method to win your fantasy football draft. I've seen it happen in mock drafts I've done before prior to this. C's, often D's. At best, I got a B minus. And yet afterwards, it was A plus every time. And so those, again, take them for what it's worth. Okay, there's other factors in there. And you're going to build off of a projection list. So I'm not giving you a projection list. Find the one that fits for you, that you think is the best and fits and is built for your league, half point, PPR, full point, etc. But none of those know your other issues in terms of the number of players and flex positions and all that. This takes all that into account. So how do you figure out whether the fourth best, or let's say the sixth best quarterback is a better option than the second best tight end? Okay, or how more often the 20th highest ranked wide receiver is more valuable than that fourth or fifth ranked running back? It depends. In some cases, one or the other is the better option. So here's how you know. You've got to know the number of teams in your league. Simple enough. You've got to have a projection list based on the settings for your league. Also simple enough. Any Yahoo Sports or ESPN or whatever wherever your league is hosted, they will have a default ranking list that they give based on those projections for point totals throughout the year. That's fine. Okay, create that. Find those, rank those, and you'll just go through positions. Here's the deal: if your 12-team league only allows 12 quarterbacks, right? So each team has to start one quarterback each week. You know that there will only be 12 quarterbacks starting in a given week. So all we're going to do is we're going to take the highest 12 ranked quarterbacks based on projected point totals that season. We're going to find that we'll just use the arithmetic mean, okay, for that position. And then what you've got to do, having found that mean, so you take the projection of the point totals for each of those 12, add them up, divide by 12. Now you've got your average number. That means the average quarterback throughout the season will get you that many points based on those projections. So what you're going to do is apply that person's projected point total. Let's say it's Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to make up a number. He's projected to score 300 points over the season. The quarterback projected score for that average is 250, so he's a plus 50. Okay, you can go to 10th or even 100th place if you want, but you want to know, okay, he's plus 50. Well, on average, your master list, the average score will be 0, right? Because you're going plus or minus the average. So you're going to apply that plus or minus for each of those 12 players now. Okay? Because you know you're going to have 12 quarterbacks starting in a given week. You're only going to take the starters for now. We're going to keep it simple. You can talk about bench stuff later and the challenges with that. But we're going to take that. Okay? Simple enough. Most leagues have one quarterback. What do you do with two? Let's say you've got two running backs you have to start. Okay? Now you've got 24 if you're a 12-team league, 28 if you're in a 14-team league, right? 20, a 10-team league, whatever. So you've got that. So you're going to have to rank then. So the larger your league is, and the more positions or the more number of players in that position you can have, that greatly increases those lower scores, or sort of brings down the overall average, which has a way of elevating those top few players who tend to be outliers. It's very rarely a linear digression from the best player and their point totals down to those lower players, right? It's typically more exponential if we were to chart that. And so this allows you to take all that into consideration. Last year, Jonathan Taylor was the projected, big time, all that stuff. And so relative to his position, he was, I think it was around 80 points above the total average points for running backs in our league based on the number of running backs that we had as options, and then building into the flex as well. I'll talk about that too. Okay, so now you take that into account, the number of teams in your league, the number of positions for that player, for that player position. Then you will rank those. You'll find an average, and then you will score based on the projections for each player, the plus or minus. Right, that's the time element that you have to commit a little bit to. But when you do that, then you're going to build out a list that has, across all positions, start to finish, all you got to do is the highest ranked player, the highest one on my list is what I do, no matter what. I got 3 wide receivers, my first 3. Well, that's how this tells me to do it, because we've got so many options. We've got multiple flex options here. In our league last year, we had 2 flex positions. We did not have any tight end requirements, and so we had 2 flex. 1 flex was a wide receiver or tight end. 1 flex was a wide receiver or running back. Well, what does that do to our league? That elevates the wide receiver position, because we had 2 wide receivers. 12. I think it was a 12-team league. I'll have to double check. I should know that. But let's say it's 12 team, so it's 24. And then what I did was I split the flex simply. Can come back to that. It's not a perfect way to do that, but we can. If you want to get more detailed, we can do that. Let's just keep it simple. We've got 24 now options for wide receiver, but then you have half of that for a flex. That's wide receiver, tight end. Okay, so let's say we did 6 tight ends, 6 wide receiver there. Again, depending on how this is at this point, having had the top 24, that might be comparable because the 30th best wide receiver might be comparable to the 6th best tight end. We can look at that. So now we've got 30 options there for wide receiver, but we had a wide receiver and running back as a second flex option. So if you add half of that flex again for the number of starters in that second flex every week, now you've got 36. So now for my wide receiver group, for my total calculation, I've got to find the top 36 projected running back or wide receivers, find that mean, and then the plus or minus there, you're going to have for a Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, that plus is going to be a lot higher than somebody in a quarterback group, for instance, who, except for there were exceptions, the Mahomes and some of those others, who were not nearly as high above that average that we were looking for. You will have some negatives as you get later rounds of the drafts. Your job is to minimize the loss right there, and that works again for the starters. Once you get past the starters, you can build out your bench from there too. We could go for down that direction. The quick caveat on the flex position: the simple way to do it is to split it up between the number of options. Let's say you've got a super flex. Maybe you go quarterback, wide receiver, or running back. Let's say you've got a 12-team league, so you do 4 additional quarterbacks. So you go from the 12 now to 16 total for when you're going to do your calculation. You do 4 on top of maybe you only have 1 super flex, so you've got 24 because you had 2 wide receiver spots. So you go 24 plus 4 more is 28. So you're going to rank your top 28. And same thing, running back. So maybe you've got 2 running back spots. So you've got an additional 4. So you've got 12, 12, 4. So we've got our 28 top running backs that we'll rank. Once we find that average for each position, then we can find the plus or minus for those groups. And it's built on the number of expected starters for each position. And so now what that allows me to do is see that this defense, because everybody's going to have one defense, maybe 1 or 2 of those go early, so I don't get defense until like way, way later. right? Because I don't need to worry about that because the ones that were the outliers far above the plus, maybe it goes plus 30 overall projection, maybe it's plus 20, and then it's like plus 4, plus 3, plus 3, plus 2 for those top, above 6. And then the below 6, those other ones are -1, -2. So not a major difference, right? As opposed to in a wide receiver group, that third or fourth wide receiver may still be more valuable after one or two of those defensive players have gone, or the one or two exceptional tight ends have gone. Those other ones are too closely related. So this allows me to create a master list of the total starting positions for my team, for my league, based on the number of teams there. So if I'm in a 12-team league, let's say we've got 10 starting positions, I'm going to need it to rank 120 players for those starting spots in my draft. And I can do that now by finding out and estimating for each position their projected average, and then calculating the plus or minus for each of those positions. Now, that's 120 calculations, but it is pretty simple. Once you found for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, depending on how you do tight ends, defense, kicker, whatever, from your list that you brought in, now you can go through using the flex or the super flex. Just the simple method is divide it by the number of positions there and adding those to those other positions. So if you've got wide receiver, running back, split that from, if it's a 14-team league, 7 to running back, 7 to wide receiver before you do that average and then the plus or minus. However it is, split that up and then combine those to those other groups. Find the average for each of those positions. Calculate the plus or minus from the projected point total for those players in the season. And now you've got your master list. And so it's a little bit of work on the front end, but once you've created that list, you can see my example. Now you can know throughout there whether or not it's time to go for my third wide receiver, or it's time to get that quarterback, or it's time to get tight end or my kicker, or whatever it might be. If you do this method, I guarantee you will do very, very, very well. You'll win your draft, and you'll be set up for success the rest of the year. And this works. What's great about this is not only does it take into account your league, it takes into account how other people draft, it takes into account the settings and so forth there, the number of teams in the league, all of that. It just does require you to take the averages for those positions, create a plus-minus system, and then combine all those together, rank them, the plus 80 Jonathan Taylor down to the negative 50, 60, whatever player down below, and your goal is to end up with the highest projected total plus or minus the average, and that will give you the greatest chance of success throughout the entire season moving forward. Okay, I wanted to end with a few examples to help as you think about how to build out your strategy here. So here's a few examples. We'll start with a simple one. 12-team league, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex position where you can have a running back, wide receiver, or tight end, a kicker, and a defense. And so you'll use, again, in this case, whatever your preferred ranking is, and you can see examples here or explanations for each position. For example, quarterback, straightforward, not a super flex here, so you're just going to rank your top 12, average the score for those top 12, and then supply a plus-minus above or below the average that each projected quarterback's total score would be for that season. Going down to some other ones, you can see some explanations for instance, wide receiver. You'd rank the top 28 because you have 2 wide receiver spots. That's 12 times 2 is 24. And then a third of the flex would go to the wide receiver. Now, I explain here in the last one, if you read this note, I'm going to come back to this. The super flex, the issue, there's a note here at the very end. It's the same with all of these flex positions. Really, the best way to do this is to create a separate category for flex positions built after you have done your other running backs, wide receivers, etc. This is just sort of a simplified version. Okay, example 2. This is a 14-team league. 1 quarterback, one running back, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end. I have sort of a flex A and a flex B. So this was how our league was set up last year, where we had a running back and wide receiver position, another one wide receiver and tight end. So you can see you could have up to 4 wide receivers starting in a given week. You may have no tight ends. You may only have 2 running backs. You could have, in this case, you could have 2 running backs up to, or just 1. Or you could have a tight end, or you might not have any, a kicker and a defense. So here, you're going to rank. You'll have a total of 126 players, 9 starters in your 14 teams, across your 14 teams. You've got your quarterback, straightforward. Some of the other ones, running backs, a little different. You have the 1 running back spot, so the 14 plus half of a flex, so 7, 21 total there. So you rank your top 21 running backs. Wide receiver, obviously you could have a lot of wide receivers, double the potential there for the running backs. So you see the explanation where each of those flex are half scores for the total number of teams, so 7, etc. there. So wide receivers, 2 times the 14 teams, you get your 28 plus 7 times 2, 14, so a total of 42 wide receivers ranked. Get your average of those 42, and then do your plus minus for all of those wide receivers, etc. down to this list, and then you're going to compile all those just ranked from the highest plus to the lowest minus. And then lastly, an example of here's a 1 flex in addition to a super flex for a 12-team league. So you can think about, if you want to pause and think about what that would look like, kind of running the numbers. And then you can read the note here at the end. I kind of explain again that the flex, or really the super flex or the flex, should be added and really done afterwards. But for simplicity's sake, if you just prefer to do it this way, distribute those evenly amongst those other positions, you'll still probably be in pretty good shape. Although, again, particularly for the super flex, because quarterbacks score so much, that may be one you want to really calculate as a separate thing. Anyway, so you have your breakdown for each of these as well. Quarterback here, again, 16. That's if you're going to break down just an even 1/3 split for the Superflex. But again, you could create its own category after creating your top 12, after doing your 24 wide receivers, after doing your 24 running backs, and your 12 tight ends. You could then go to your, I'd probably do the Superflex next, where you do your next best running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks, all remaining on their own right for their projected point totals. So in this case, no longer apples and oranges across positions, but just apples to apples. They're all one position, one spot on your roster, and so you go from there. Okay, that's it. Hope this helps a lot. Let me know in the comments any thoughts, and look forward to hearing and hopefully reading more about the success you had from this, albeit a little bit time-consuming draft strategy that I'm confident will help you win your draft this year.